Yeah.
They call me Donut King.
On American Experience.
Billy Graham is like the Protestant Pope.
I'm Carrie Healy, and this is Beacon Hill in 5, our look at the week ahead.
Coming up, stories we're connecting you with tonight.
From American Public Media, this is Marketplace.
It's all on NEPM.
You're watching New England Public Media, WGBY Springfield.
PBS is proud to present The Latino Experience, a special collection of short films from a visionary group of filmmakers. From intimate family dramas,
That's a promise,
to thought-provoking documentaries. Witness the stories, the struggles, the celebrations. 13 short films that highlight the rich and diverse world of The Latino Experience.
Tune in or stream The Latino Experience July 6th at 9.
Coming up, stories we're connecting you with tonight. After almost closing due to the pandemic, a beloved haven for music and the arts gets a second chance.
We got 60,000 responses right after we announced, and that to us was amazing.
A local woman tackles the issue of homelessness in her community.
1 is independence, 2, transportability, and 3, a semblance of a home.
And the Victory Theater players bring you 𝗚𝘁𝘆 𝗀𝘆 IV.
The first response was like just sheer joy. I think, I was near tears when I heard the sound of the instruments together. I mean, it's just such a precious thing.
Details on those stories and more up next on Connecting Point.
Support for Connecting Point is provided by our contributing viewers.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us for Connecting Point. I'm 𝗖𝗶𝘁𝗆 𝗏𝗏. Unfortunately, it's all too common for some to walk past the homeless and disregard the person lying on the street or ignore the sign being held at the intersection with a plea for help. That's not the case for Melinda Shaw of Florence. Recognizing the serious issue of homelessness in her city, she started a nonprofit group called Hope on Wheels. Its mission is to provide the local unhoused population with a modular live-in unit, giving them privacy, security, and safety from the elements. And producer Dave Frazier brings us the story.
It's a feeling of desperation, really. I had my stuff on my back and no place to put it.
As of January 2020, Massachusetts had an estimated 17,975 people experiencing homelessness on any given day.
I was in my life where I was between jobs and I had a big debt to pay to my landlord, and I just didn't have anywhere to go and I didn't have any resources. And so that brought me to the streets.
Today, Kelly is no longer part of what sometimes is referred to as America's hidden population. But for people experiencing homelessness, finding a safe, sheltered place to stay is a constant challenge. Enter Northampton resident Melinda Shaw, who started a project called Hope on Wheels, building mobile humanity pods that can be towed behind a bicycle, giving someone who is homeless a secure place to sleep, eat, and store their possessions.
I believe that it helps accomplish several things. 1 is independence, 2, transportability, and 3, a semblance of a home.
The inspiration for the pods came from her work with the First Churches of Northampton, where she helped run a cot shelter as well as distribute resources to the homeless.
I have seen people sleeping on the front steps of the church in the winter, so I would say it is greatly improved from that, and it certainly is more durable than a tent. It won't collapse in the snow, but it's definitely weatherproof.
Shaw's hope is to have 20 pods built by the end of the year. She is looking for volunteer teams to step up and commit to building a pod. Teams must be able to provide a used bike and pay a $500 registration fee to cover the cost of materials.
I have 7 teams registered right now, and 4 of them are actively building right now. Reflective tape, the ability to lock with a padlock here, The inside, we've got cup holders here. This will be a 4-inch memory foam mattress, cargo nets, cupboards.
Shaw is trying to work with the city to establish places where these pods can be parked overnight. She knows these pods will not solve the problem of homelessness in her city, but what they can provide is some personal dignity and an opportunity for someone who needs it to have their own space.
It's filling a gap, and you know, when I interact with people downtown, I often get the, well, what about this and what about that? And you know, I can't fix everything. You know, I'm not God, and I'm doing something. And so I just say, I'm doing something. What are you doing?
Last December, like many local businesses, Gateway City Arts in Holyoke fell victim to the pressures of the pandemic and announced that after nearly 10 years in operation, it would be closing its doors for good. However, this spring, the complex received a new lease on life by entering into a partnership with DSP Shows, which will be taking over the booking and programming for the live music aspect of the business. I spoke with co-directors and owners 𝗺rie Devine and 𝗵𝘱𝗀𝘀, along with John Sanders, partner and talent buyer at DSP Shows, to hear more about their partnership and the value that this venue adds to the region.
We tried to hold on. We got a first PPP loan. We tried to keep staff. We didn't want to close, but we also knew that we had to, probably around December, made sense for us. We just couldn't keep going. It was money. It was money. It was the uncertainty. It was anxiety. It was not knowing when this pandemic was going to be over, if ever life would return to normal. So we just decided we just couldn't do it anymore.
And as co-directors and co-owners of Gateway City Arts, I know that it was important for the both of you to not only want to sell the business, but to sell the brand as well. Why was that so important for you? And was it challenging to find someone to carry on that vision?
It was very important. Gateway City Arts from the very beginning became the driving force behind the revitalization of downtown. And we got 60,000 responses right like the second day after we announced. And that to us was amazing incentive also to like, okay, we really need to find somebody now who's going to continue similar operation so this doesn't become a warehouse or it doesn't become something else.
Yeah, and I wanted to get into that because fast forward 5 months later, having to decide to close the business, and then you got a lifeline with this new partnership with DSP Productions. Yeah. How did the partnership form, and what is it going to look like?
Well, so DSP Shows is my company with my partner Dan, and we have been doing shows at Gateway City Arts and in other places in Western Mass for a long time. And when 𝗵𝘱𝗀𝗃 and 𝗺rie told me that they were going to close, I was disappointed and was trying to figure out, you know, what could we do? Would there be a way to figure out a partnership that we could continue to do this and have myself and our company step up in a bigger way to take over the operations of the club and keep bringing the kind of shows that we want to bring to Western Mass, that really, if Gateway wasn't there, I don't think would be coming to Western Mass. So we formed a partnership, a new company that's going to run the venue, and DSP Shows will continue to put concerts in there, you know, everything from reggae and folk and indie rock, and we have a partner who is a friend of mine, Neil Robinson, who's going to help us run the venue as well.
Now, John, as you mentioned, you've done work with Gateway City Arts in the past, as well as other venues in the area, such as the Academy Music of in Northampton and Pines Theater. How important and vital are venues like this for the region?
They're hugely vital, and there have been so many studies that have shown that venues like this not only bring people to town to see concerts, but they bring people to town to spend money at restaurants and bring foot traffic to stores in downtowns, to hotels. It's a huge economic stimulus for these communities where these art centers are. And I think that Gateway, Laurie and VTech prove that Holyoke is a place that people want to go. It's a beautiful spot. There's a lot to do, and it's an incubator of arts and ideas and bringing people together in a great city.
Now, in addition to the concerts held at Gateway City Arts, the venue also includes a theater, restaurants, and a rental space for organizations and private parties. With the remaining COVID-19 restrictions being lifted in the state of Massachusetts, what does the future look like for the other aspects that make up Gateway City Arts?
Yes, we are very excited about continuing to start to program the theater. With John running the music, we will be also more focused on smaller acts, which will also include theater, poetry readings, salons, more community-oriented events, and private events as well. And of course, the restaurant is going to continue, but we don't know yet exactly when it's that going to happen.
I think it's safe to say that you all have been on an emotional roller coaster with having to decide to close down in December and now forming this partnership to revitalize Gateway City Arts. What have you all learned during this past year?
We've learned like how important these live entertainment venues are to communities and how much people miss them, and how watching live music on a computer can only go so far, and the connections that you make with other humans in the same room sharing an experience are just invaluable and not replaceable. And I miss it, and I know a lot of people miss it, and we just are really excited to get back to it.
And for me, on a more personal note, I feel like what I've learned and realized is how important our entire staff was. That it really did feel like family, and we are starting up again, and not everybody, but some people are very excited to come back, and it just feels like we're ready to explode again, you know, and just have fun and be safe, mostly be safe.
Every Friday night, Connecting Point explores the creativity, culture, and community that make us Western New England. But it doesn't stop there. You can find us online anytime for exclusive features and content. In our digital exclusive this week, we're examining the unique history of Western Massachusetts' largest city. Springfield has long been known as the city of homes, and for many of us in the Pioneer Valley and beyond, it's either the city we live in or commute to for work. But what many might not realize is just how many things have been invented in Springfield, giving it another title, the City of Firsts.
Springfield is also home to the first ever parking meter. Not sure who thought that was a good idea. Of course, parking meters do not apply to fire engines when they arrive on the scene. And as it turns out, Springfield can lay claim to having the first ever motorized fire wagon.
Don't miss this digital exclusive, available online right now at nepm.org/connectingpoint. The decade-long wait for Windsor State Forest to be a functioning, employee-led state park again is nearly over. This past winter, Connecting Point's Brian Sullivan visited the secluded woodland area on the edge of the northern Berkshires to speak with members of the Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation about their plans for reopening the park. He was invited back this spring to bring us this progress report.
Somewhere deep in the woods of the Berkshires, there's a really tall tree just minding its own business. Elsewhere, a tributary spills over countless rocks and stones en route to a bigger waterway. There's even a hiker walking through this forest for the first time in nearly half a year. Overall, though, nothing really out of the ordinary happening here. That is, until we step outside this curtain of pine and oak and see more activity taking place in this parking lot in one day than the previous 10 years combined. For the paving crew in charge of this operation, it's just another day at the office. But at the Windsor State Forest, it means this location is one step closer to becoming a functioning park again.
We're really excited about it, if you can't tell by the enthusiasm I'm trying to Park's been closed for 10 years. We knew it was this little hidden resource. Now we're really excited. It's almost like we're opening the curtain on something that some folks had forgotten about.
It may seem like a distant memory now, but for decades, this lot would be jammed with cars. And it really wasn't too long ago either, as most of the construction workers in this crew had stories of coming here with their families when they were children. Now, the buildings around which they're doing their paving operations are two of the centerpieces for this $2 million reclamation project. The first being the contact station at the edge of the parking lot.
Everyone that visits the park walks by that space. That's where you will see a DCR staff person there to greet, to inform. Here's a trails map, here's the rules, having a picnic.
The second is the comfort station. Just 1 week before the paving, this building was getting new flooring put in. It would feature not only toilets and sinks, but showers and a dishwashing station, as well as a paved walkway through the center and around the back of the building. This recreational area will eventually be covered with new sod and feature a pavilion in the center. An unpaved accessible walkway made with a soil stabilizing material circles the perimeter and passes by the future swimming locale. It's closed now, but will be part of Phase 2 in the year 2022. And as I learned in late December of 2020, when I first began to unravel their mysteries, the path also leads to several hiking trails. It was pretty neat to return all these months later for just my second walk through these woods. Prior to 2020, I hadn't even been down the road that leads here, never mind the park itself. But it's quickly becoming one of my favorite nature spots around. For starters, the trees are immense. Secondly, I can hear the sound of rushing water all around, whether it's the Steep Bank Brook right here, or the East Branch of the Westfield River, which is just around the bend. But most importantly, it's remote. There is no chance that this phone will get any coverage while I'm out here, at least for now. This payphone is the last link to a bygone era, as the new era of high-speed internet comes to the park. So the next question is, when do these work trucks leave and these signs come down?
We are targeting late June. I think right now our working calendar date is Saturday, June 26th. That is sort of our unofficial opening of our day use facilities. So that is the working date. We hope to be close to that, maybe even a little bit ahead of that. So it will absolutely be open and operational this summer.
The Massachusetts International Festival of the Arts Victory Players are back this summer with another installment of their popular 𝗀𝘀𝘆 series. 𝗀𝘀𝘆 IV will feature 9 new compositions from Puerto Rican composers, and I spoke with the music director of the Victory Players to hear more about this new installment and what the future holds for the series.
We wanted firstly to celebrate our wonderful Puerto Rico community here in Holyoke, and which is where we are based at the Victory Theater, as you said, sponsored by the Massachusetts International Festival of the Arts. And you know, we thought about various different titles, and we landed on the original meaning of the word Puerto Rico, which is the rich port. And I think, you know, this is something that, you know, a lot of people don't realize about, that, you know, Puerto Rico is in some ways some of the oldest parts and the oldest music in America is in Puerto Rico. And it has a, you know, half a millennium long musical history. And really rich musical heritage culture, and we wanted to celebrate that. So we thought, what better way to do that than to approach composers with an interest in Puerto Rico, either from Puerto Rico or somebody who has engaged with Puerto Rico in the past, to write pieces about that. And what we have now is 10 new pieces by 9 different composers, with all of them very different styles and very different takes. And what a way to exemplify the word rich, and a port of call with all of these different ideas coming together to meet in Puerto Rico.
So as you mentioned, 𝗀𝘀𝘆 IV will feature new compositions by these Puerto Rican composers. Walk me through the creative process and what it's like bringing all these composers and musicians together from all these different backgrounds in the same space.
I have to say it's super exciting. First of all, I think, with the composers, it's really an exploration. We start with meeting and talking about, their vision of what they want to say. And, I think for a lot of our composers of Puerto Rican descent, there was also the question of the identity, as a Puerto Rican, as an American, and, what that means, and how am I going to say that through music? And so for some of them, it was very, very personal. So, Cristian Quiñones, for example, wrote a piece that was called What My Mother Wrote. And he realized, he is Puerto Rican. And it's essentially what he does is by default Puerto Rican music. And he wanted to say something a little bit more than that. He wanted to talk about his relationship with his mother, which is something that's very universal. And the music very naturally was infused with all these wonderful rhythms of bomba and plena, just kind of ever so slightly in the background. And there's one piece this year that we're super excited about, and it's by 𝗁𝗂𝘁𝗆 𝗁𝗂𝘀, and it's called Prince of Lost Breath. And it is inspired by the demonstrations in Loíza in Puerto Rico in response to the death of George Floyd. And instead of focusing on the darkness that that incident represented, he focused instead on the global a response to kind of structural racism and the anti-racist movement, if you will, and the music therefore celebrates that. But it's so special because we got to work with a local group, 𝗵𝘶𝘆 𝗀𝘃, which is based right here in Springfield and Holyoke, and they do a lot of work in Western Massachusetts public schools. And here we are, classical contemporary ensemble meeting this wonderful bomba band and dancer, and we're learning all these things about the culture, and the music just makes so much sense together, and it's so exciting.
So the composers arrived this weekend, and now you are all together working on these pieces for El Puerto Rico IV. How has this past week been going for you so far?
We just came out of a pandemic, and I think that's the most obvious thing. And it took a lot of doing to get everybody here. So I think the first response was like just sheer joy. I think, I was near tears when I heard the sound of the instruments together. I mean, it's just such a precious thing. And I think for musicians and also the composers, for many of us, it's been 15 to 16 months of no human contact. And music is so direct, it's so emotionally connected. And, just the idea that, I'm watching the dancer move and I'm playing some sound that reflects that is magic.
The first two iterations of El Puerto Rico included musical workshops with the Victory players within schools in the area. How has the pandemic affected that aspect of the program, and what have you had to do differently?
Every single school had slightly different responses. I think their classroom schedules were slightly different, the buildings were slightly different. But I think the most difficult thing is that the timetable was moving constantly. I think that's the experience of everybody. During this pandemic, everything keeps changing. You do the same job 7 times, and then at the last minute, you do it an 8th time. I think that's been the hardest thing here. So normally we would go to the schools and we would contact the teachers and say, okay, so we're going to come the first week of June, and we're going to, meet with our students and so on. And I don't think anybody could have actually told us that we could meet with them in person and what the protocols were going to be in February when we were planning all of this. So, so what we have done instead is that this time round, we're taking JJ's piece, Prince of Lost Breath, and we're actually recording it in a studio. And then we're working with JJ and 𝗵𝘶𝘆 𝗀𝘃, and we will actually be creating programs for elementary school, middle school, and high school. And they will now all be in a package that's going to be online that the teachers can actually access at any time that they'd like.
The first time that you experiment a little bit with a virtual event was earlier this year when El Puerto Rico III had to go virtual due to the restrictions of the pandemic. What were some of the challenges and also positive insights that you learned with having to reimagine this series?
When we commissioned the pieces, Zoom was not certainly a major factor in our decisions. And so composers made decisions about instruments and so on that don't record well on Zoom, for example, or don't interact very well on Zoom. And then there's those, for musicians, I think the biggest trouble is this thing called lag. So, by the time I play a sound and it goes to the Zoom server and back to you, 𝗁𝘂𝘁𝗄𝘁, it's already delayed. And by the time it comes back to me, it's further delayed, it's doubly delayed. And so we can actually perform as if we are sitting next to each other. And so we have to pre-record some things. And so what we had to very, very quickly do, and we're so grateful to our wonderful artists and composers that they are being so flexible and so kind to us. We met a whole group of composers with Puerto Rican heritage back in October, and we said, okay, look, we can't actually perform normally. Can you write us pieces that's going to actually be playable through Zoom and that we can actually record? So that was one big thing. You know, we sat down together and explored what were the technical difficulties there and created pieces that facilitated good performances with that. And then we actually reduced everything so it was just 2 people. So theoretically, it would be possible for somebody to play something on the background on their computers and then actually just perform live.
Hard to believe for all of us, but we are now entering a post-pandemic new normal. What does that mean for the 𝗪𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁 series? What will be unveiled in the future of this program?
We are hoping that we're going to be doing video and sound recordings, and coming out of that, we'll be able to make a variety of things from them, whether it's podcasts, a radio show, a spot feature, and actually appearing in somebody else's music show, for example. But also like a little mini series with videos and interviews with the composers that is going to live on WGBH's website as well as the MIFA and NEPM websites. And that's kind of cool because, I think one of the, if you will, side projects of that is like, this, what we say in new music and new classical music, it's like, who's afraid of classical music? Well, nobody. This is like, like there's dancing, there's playing, there's bomba. It's just so exciting, and I think, people relax into it, and the various formats that we're talking about actually allow people to get kind of up close and personal with us, to see and to hear. And we hope to actually do a little live component at some point where we actually can interact with the audience at large. So I think that's very exciting for the Puerto Rico project.
That does it for Connecting Point for June 4th, 2021. Remember, you can always find the stories that you saw tonight, as well as exclusive features, digital-only content, and more online anytime at nepm.org/connectingpoint. And please join us again next Friday night at 6 right here on New England Public Media for more stories of the creativity, culture, and community that make us Western New England. I'm 𝗖𝗶𝘁𝗆𝗆. Thanks for watching and have a great evening.
Support for Connecting Point is provided by our contributing viewers.
Behold the world's foremost all-male comic ballet company, 𝗪𝗶𝘱𝗀𝗀𝗄𝘃 𝗪𝗁𝗀 𝗪𝗁𝗀.
Why not men in tutus?
The Trocs.
We were celebrating ballet as the greatest thing in the world, and it can stand a little parody.